So recently, I've been getting asked what it's like to play Venthyr Arcane. Well, it goes a little something like this. What's up everybody, my name is Phosphorus and I welcome you to the patch 9.1.5 Venthyr Arcane Mage Guide. This is going to be a single target raid focused guide, and of course, we're going to cover everything you need to get out there and deal some damage. So what can you expect from playing Venthyr? Venthyr has a very reliable burst due to Mirrors of Torment guaranteeing damage during our burn phases. And with the Slipstream talent, you can expect to be able to move freely during your cooldowns, so if you hate relying on crit with Kyrian or hate being immobile to do your damage, Venthyr's a decent alternative playstyle. So for Venthyr Arcane Mage, the best performing single target legendary is going to be Siphon Storm. We're going to be using this legendary to give us a huge power boost right before we pop our cooldowns, and you're going to want to craft this on your legs with Critical Strike and Mastery. For our Soulbinds and Conduits, we want to take Theotar as our primary Soulbind. Theotar provides us consistent damage and mana regen through Soothing Shade, and free stats with party favors. We also get 2 charges of Door of Shadows, which gives us extra mobility. For our Conduits, we want to take Siphoned Malice, Magi's Brand, and Arcane Prodigy. Moving on to talents, if you're used to playing Kyrian Arcane, there's only one talent swap we make for Venthyr, and that's Arcane Echo in row 35. Arcane Echo will make every instance of damage done during Touch of the Magi create an explosion around the target. This has really great synergy with Amplification, since we'll be stacking as many clearcasts as possible prior to our Touch of the Magi burns. And since we're stacking all these clearcasts, I would also recommend you take Slipstream even if you're used to playing Shimmer, just because Slipstream will allow you to move freely during your cooldowns, which is one of the biggest upsides to playing Venthyr. For our stats, you're generally going to end up with a low amount of haste, a decent amount of crit, and a high amount of mastery. The stat distribution shown here is what my character looks like right now, but you're going to want to make sure you're regularly simming your character and making gearing decisions around what Raidbots recommends. For Trinkets, you're going to want to aim for an Empyreal Ordnance. This is the best single target unused trinket for Venthyr, and it flows well into the rotation as we can build clearcasting stacks while it's charging. And right as we pop our cooldowns, we'll be getting that huge intellect buff. If you don't have an Empyreal Ordnance, then a Soul-Letting Ruby also works well. As for the second trinket, I like using the Forbidden Necromantic Tome, but you can also run an Unbound Changeling or Titanic Ocular Gland. Just remember to sim your character to find out what works best for you. Alright, so before we get into the single target rotation, we first need to understand how the Covenant ability Mirrors of Torment works. This ability puts a 3-stack debuff on your target that causes you to gain a free stack of clearcasting anytime your target performs an action. You can only get 1 free stack every 6 seconds, and the effect ends after either 25 seconds pass, or you get all 3 stacks of clearcasting. I have a WeakAura in the description that will help you see the internal cooldown of each proc, and it'll make performing the burn rotation a lot smoother, so make sure you pick it up. You can use the Training Dummy and the Zarlor to practice your rotation and get used to the ability. Just keep in mind that the Training Dummy will proc stacks of mirrors immediately, whereas a live target might take a couple seconds to do so. Now let's get into the openers. First we'll go over the standard opener you'll be using if you don't have the Empyreal Ordnance trinket. On pre-pull you want to try and fish for a clearcasting proc, then 6 seconds before the pull, you want to pop Evocation to stack Siphon Storm. As soon as you get your 6th stack of Siphon Storm, which will usually take about 5 seconds, you want to pop Mirrors of Torment into an Arcane Orb. From there, you want to start spamming Arcane Blast until 1 second before the internal cooldown for the second Mirror of Torment ends. If you get lucky here and reach 3 clearcasting stacks early, you can use Arcane Missiles so you don't overcap on stacks. Just make sure you don't go under 2 stacks, since our goal is to have that second mirror proc our 3rd clearcasting stack. The reason for this is that you want to pop your cooldowns with 2 stacks of Siphon Malice, so you can take advantage of that huge spell damage buff. So right before the internal cooldown ends, you want to dump your Arcane Charges with Arcane Barrage, then pop Touch of the Magi into Arcane Power and spam Arcane Missiles for the duration of Touch of the Magi. Now, if your last Arcane Missiles during Touch of the Magi is not empowered by clearcasting, then you're going to want to use Presence of Mind to fit an Arcane Blast right before Touch of the Magi ends. If your last Arcane Missiles is empowered by clearcasting, you want to let it complete the cast, then start spamming Arcane Blast and use Presence of Mind to fit an extra blast into Rune of Power right before it ends. From here, you cast Arcane Blast until Arcane Power wears off, then finish off the burn with Arcane Barrage, and that's the end of the standard opener. Now for the Empyreal Ordnance opener. Pre-pull, we want to fish for clearcasting with Arcane Explosion, then 6 seconds before pull we pop Evocation to stack Siphon Storm. Once you hit 6 stacks, you want to pop Rune of Power into an Empyreal Ordnance into Arcane Orb. From here you want to cast 2 Arcane Blasts, or if you got a clearcast from pre-pull, 1 Arcane Missiles and 1 Arcane Blast. Then you pop Mirrors of Torment, and you want to start spamming Arcane Blast until 1 second before the internal cooldown for the second Mirror of Torment ends. Once again, if you reach 3 clearcasting stacks early, you can use an Arcane Missiles to not overcap, but the goal is to have 2 clearcasting stacks such that the second mirror procs our 3rd clearcasting. So 1 second before the internal cooldown ends, you want to dump your charges with Arcane Barrage, pop Touch of the Magi into Arcane Power, and spam missiles for the duration of Touch of the Magi. Similar to the standard opener, if your last Arcane Missiles during Touch of the Magi is not empowered by clearcasting, then you're going to want to use Presence of Mind to fit an Arcane Blast right before Touch of the Magi ends. If your last Arcane Missiles is empowered by clearcasting, you want to let it complete the cast, then start spamming Arcane Blast and use Presence of Mind to fit an extra blast into Rune of Power right before it ends. Finish off Arcane Power with Arcane Blasts, then dump with Arcane Barrage, and that's the end of the Empyreal Ordnance opener. Now let's discuss the filler rotation. Our goal in the filler rotation is to do some decent damage while mostly conserving our mana, and we perform the filler rotation anytime we aren't using cooldowns like Rune of Power or Touch of the Magi. So the filler rotation consists of following a simple priority list. If Arcane Orb is off cooldown, first dump your Arcane Charges with Barrage, and then use Arcane Orb. Outside of that, you want to be spamming Arcane Blast unless you're under 50% mana, in which you want to conserve mana by building up to 4 charges and dumping them with Arcane Barrage. If you get clearcasting stacks during this period, you want to try and save them for any upcoming Rune of Power or Touch of the Magi's, otherwise you can use them freely. Next, let's talk about the mini burn. Venthyr Arcane will have different mini burns depending on how your cooldowns line up. Sometimes you'll use Touch of the Magi and Rune of Power together, other times you'll use them separately. Regardless, you always want to use Touch of the Magi immediately on cooldown, and this same rule follows for Rune of Power unless Touch of the Magi is less than 15 seconds away, in which it's worth it to delay Rune of Power and use them together. Now whether you use Touch of the Magi by itself or with Rune of Power, 12 seconds before it comes off cooldown, you want to be spamming Arcane Blast and saving clearcasting stacks. Then right before Touch of the Magi comes off cooldown, use Arcane Barrage, cast Touch of the Magi, and then cast Arcane Missiles for the entire duration. As for using Rune of Power by itself, you pretty much just want to spam Arcane Blast and use any clearcasts you get, unless of course you're saving those clearcasts for an upcoming Touch of the Magi. Lastly, there's one more burn that we can do, and that's an Evocation burn. This is when you spam Arcane Blast to deplete your mana to 0% right before popping Evocation. You want to time this burn such that you hit 0% mana and pop Evocation when Arcane Power is going to be off cooldown soon, and Touch of the Magi is either 14 seconds from being off cooldown, or 17 seconds from being off cooldown if you plan on using Empyreal Ordnance. Here's a quick 5-minute segment of me performing the rotation on a training dummy with the Empyreal Ordnance Trinket. And that's the end of the video. These guides take a ton of work to make, but I make them because I'm listening to the community, and when you request it, and you say that it helps you, that's enough reason for me to get to work and get it done. That said, if you have any ideas for any content you might want to see, or if you need clarification on anything I covered, please let me know down in the comments. If you liked the video, consider giving it a thumbs up, and consider subscribing if you want to see more Mage content going forward. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video.